Hello and welcome to Betfair's first ever edition of Trade Talk. My name is Karl Kaldawi and I'm joined by Darren, Parkin, and we're hoping to do this every week. We're going to look at different trades and opportunities on the Betfair Exchange. Daz, how are you?
Going very well, yeah. It's an awesome experience to be involved. It's a hell of a first round. So many tough matches to look at, and good thing about having a public holiday this week is we're now only a couple of sleeps away from Richmond Carlton, which is about as big as it gets.
So like I said, this show's all about talking about trading and a little bit dissimilar to trading at the end of the year. But what is trading? Sports trading is where bettors back or lay on sporting events in order to make a profit. The goal is to lock in a profit before the end of the event, regardless of the final outcome. So as goes on the Betfair Exchange, you want to back high and lay low and try find the differences on each end of the market. But Daz, what are some of the things that make a good trader on the Betfair Exchange?
Yeah, I think it's the ability to see forward and look at a fixture or look at an outcome as to how it's likely to play out in the run. So in football, you've obviously got 22 weeks of a season, and you might look at Carlton or Collingwood, who are tipped by a lot of people to make the finals or finish top four, but both of them have really tricky starts to the season. So you might look at it and go, their price is what it is now. It's only going to get a little bit higher. That might be the time that you play it. And then now it would be the time that you'd sort of stay away from it or lay that option. So it's really sort of looking at it going, when is the right time to bet on this and when is the right time to perhaps let it go?
And obviously looking at the week-to-week markets, we're going to be betting on AFL games round by round, but there's so many trading opportunities in the futures markets, top 8, top 4, least wins, the premiership market. So looking forward to bringing you, the latest on all those markets, and hopefully we can have some successful trades throughout the year. But let's get stuck into it, Daz. A team that we're most intrigued by to start off. Obviously, it's been a long preseason. AFL punters are ready to get stuck back into it, but is there a team that you're intrigued to see?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Port Adelaide, when we were doing the season previews of them, looking at their year last year, which was underwhelming, but they did lose their first 5, and they got going a bit after that, having made back-to-back prelims before it. But they went 2-9 against top 8 sides last year, so I guess that's the concern. And they only won about 30% of games away from the Adelaide Oval, so a lot of people tipping them to make the 8. Their odds are actually better than the likes of Fremantle and comparable to the Western Bulldogs. So it's really fascinating to see just how good they actually are, because last year they were beating a lot of sides that they should beat, like Adelaide, West Coast, Essendon, North Melbourne. Can they turn that into beating some of those top sides, which they'll need to do to make the finals? What about yours? They are a fascinating side and a fascinating betting side.
Yeah, well, I think we're going to be talking about Carlton for much of the season. They are an interesting side. I mean, from a betting proposition, I know that we're going to be talking about potentially trading in and out of Carlton throughout the season, but obviously saw Sam Walsh at Sunday training, running laps, which was an awesome sign for Carlton fans at Princes Park. Looking forward to seeing him return. Will it be in the first month of football? Who knows? It's certainly not going to be round 1. But a couple of the other interesting ones were Corey Durden was participating in regular training, and there's been a bit of an injury cloud on him. He was doing goal kicking during match sim, so he'll be probably touch and go for round 1. Jack Martin wasn't seen at all, basically, during training. He didn't have his football boots on. He was just in his runners kicking for goal. The other couple, Mitch McGovern, he wasn't cited during match sim, and neither was Jesse Motlop, a couple of players that we highlighted in the pre-season preview. So Carlton are a really intriguing side, and obviously they're going to have a tough task against Richmond in round 1, which they've had a bit of trouble against that side. Basically since 2013 in that finals game where Carlton finished 9th and then beat Richmond in that first elimination final. It's going to be an interesting round 1 for the Blues. But look, we're going to head over to our next segment, and it's called Market Watch, and we're going to have a look at the premiership market. But Daz, have you got any insights that you want to give us from a premiership top 8 market point of view?
Yeah, and on that previous, I was going to go through St Kilda's injury list, but we don't have a long enough program. So I was going to have a chat about what it's done for their chances. But obviously there is a bet on them that I want to touch on shortly. But the Giants, when we were doing our season previews, one of our colleagues, Tom Happel, mentioned that the Giants, they're into 13s now. They were $16 to win the least amount of games this year. And if you compare that to, say, North Melbourne and Hawthorn, who are both about $2.80, and then Essendon at $4. Some interesting games this week. So the Giants play Adelaide, who are another team expected to miss the finals. Hawthorn play Essendon, so two of those sides play each other, and North Melbourne plays West Coast, so two of those sides play each other. So I think the least wins market will move quite a bit this week, regardless of what happens in any of those matches. But I think the Giants represent a bit of value there. We touched on Port Adelaide making the 8 and where they sit in it, but one of the fascinating features on the exchange is head-to-head on teams winning more games than the other. So Hawthorn and North Melbourne have been put together, obviously, with the Clarkson link. Hawthorn are actually slight favourites in that. I don't mind North Melbourne, to be honest. I think Hawthorn have reset even further. And St Kilda Essendon, I did see those two sides play each other in a practice match. And as much as St Kilda are transitioning under a new coach, I'm surprised Essendon are favourites in the head-to-head with St Kilda. So I think North Melbourne and the Saints represent value in those respective head-to-heads.
Yeah, well, the market's interesting. Currently on the Betfair Exchange, you've obviously got Geelong at the pointy end. They're $1.10 to make the top 8. Melbourne, $1.21 to back them for the top 8. Brisbane, Richmond, Carlton, who's currently $1.64, so just drifting slightly from a couple of weeks ago. They were around the $1.56 mark. Obviously, a little bit of mail, and people are having a look at their first opening 2 rounds where they play Richmond and Geelong. If they lose those, we'll be looking at them to drift slightly more, and then followed by Collingwood, Port Adelaide, Fremantle, Western Bulldogs, who are tied around the rest of the market. So it's going to be interesting. One of the great developments of the Betfair Hub in season 2023 is our data scientists have actually put together a ladder predictor. And what it's going to do is it's going to run simulations for every single game and then predict future outcomes, looking at markets such as the top 4 and top 8. And what we can do with that information is when the ladder predictor rates something at, say, $2.80 and there's a discrepancy on the exchange prices, we can either back or lay using a negative or positive edge. So it's a really, really good tool for punters to have a look at what the model is predicting versus what the odds are on the exchange. Daz, there's obviously been a couple of insights already out of those markets.
Yeah, some of the better ones. So Geelong, who have finished top 4 13 times in 16 seasons, there is a 20% edge on them based on the predictor. And when you factor in, they play 9 games at Kardinia Park, where they win on average about 8 of those games. So that would mean that they'd really only have to go 7 and 6 or something for the rest of the year to finish top 4. So the 20% is good there. The other 2 interesting ones are around the top 4, Sydney and Collingwood. So Sydney, it's 14% better if you think they can make the top 4. The disclaimer on that is because they got belted in the grand final last year, and teams that have been belted in grand finals have historically struggled. Since 1995, Sydney is the only team to finish top 4 the year after they lose a grand final by 40 points or more, and that was in 2015, the year after they got belted by Hawthorn. So you'd have to back them in to do it again. We've seen the Giants and the Crows and the Bulldogs and a number of sides struggle after a heavy grand final defeat. And Collingwood. So Collingwood last year won 11 games in a row that were decided by less than 2 goals over the course of the season. If they had a normal run in those matches, let's say 7 and 4, they would have missed the finals, not just missed top 4, they would have missed the 8. So for those that think Collingwood, rode a bit of luck, which I don't think they did. I think they obviously had the bottle to win those close games, but laying Collingwood for the top 4 would be a 16% edge in terms of probability. So you can have a bit of fun with the top 4 market on those 3 teams, I think. But Geelong at 20%, that'd almost be a lock, I would think.
Yeah, well, the beauty is that we look at those insights, and potentially throughout the season, if the markets are changing, we can always trade in and trade out of our different bets. But I'm going to love this segment, Daz. You've come up with a name, and it's very good, and it suits the Betfair Exchange. It's called Buy, Hold and Sell. And you're going to kick us off, Daz.
Yeah, so obviously buy someone who you think that their stocks are obviously going to rise. You hold someone who you're a little bit cautious on, and you sell someone who you think is getting perhaps spooked that might go the other way. So I'm buying Melbourne. I think they should almost be premiership favourites. If you look at their star power with Petrarca and Oliver and Gawn and Brayshaw, Salem was injured a lot last year, and they belted Richmond in that last practice match, which doesn't mean a lot, but Gawn and Grundy, 3 goals each when they rested forward. we wanted to see how that would work. And for a while, they were the two best ruckmen in the comp. So for me, that's my buy. I think the D's could certainly be the best team in it.
Well, there's already $275,000 matched on the premiership market in the Betfair Exchange. On the Betfair Exchange, and Melbourne are currently $640 to back them. So that's a good call. Daz, for me, I'm going to buy stocks in Darcy Fogarty. He kicked 31 goals in the last 12 games of last year, and that included multiple goals in 10 games. He looks like the sort of player, with Riley Thilthorpe as well, to take over the mantle of best key forward at Adelaide from Taylor Walker. He's shown no signs of slowing down, but which actually could be a good thing for Darcy Fogarty. So currently $30 for the Coleman. I think that's nice value. And if Darcy was to potentially kick some goals early in the year, I can see his price definitely firming, and that's a good trading opportunity on the Betfair Exchange. Daz, you keen to hold?
Yeah, I'm going to hold Collingwood. Mentioned earlier that the market's around top four. First month of the year is pretty tricky. So they've got Geelong, they've got Richmond, and they play Brisbane at the Gabba in that first month. So I think that after that, they should win 5 or 6 in a row. So it might be a case of just wait and see where they sit. Have they kicked on from last year? Are they going to be able to ride that wave? Just want to see how competitive they are in the first couple of weeks before we sort of make a decision on the Pies.
Well, for me, it's Will Ashcroft for the rising star. Look, he's shown a lot of promise for a young player, and looks the young player to beat in that market this year. But what punters have to remember is he is only 18, 19 years old, or turning 19. It's a long season for them. Young players need breaks, get injured, and Brisbane really don't need him every week. They've got a stocked midfield. And then there's also some really talented players around that market. Harry Sheasel, who's going to play a lot of games for North Melbourne. Sam Darcy looks like one that's going to improve immensely after debuting and playing a couple of games last year. We know Ollie Hollins is a bit of a smoky, but he's playing round one for Carlton on that wing, and he's certainly going to be prominent throughout the year. Cam McKenzie. So I'm just going to be holding on Will Ashcroft because I'm keen to see how he plays in the first couple of rounds, but also spec a couple around the rising star market. And finally, sell. Who are we laying, Daz?
Just going to sell Essendon. I know that sometimes pre-season criticism can be premature, and they've been a side that has been a bit bouncy, like Melbourne in the 90s, where they'll sort of be down bottom 4, then they'll sneak into the 8, then bottom 4 again. I just think that whilst they are tracking the right way with their list, that they've probably been slightly overrated in some of those markets, such as the head-to-head with St Kilda. I think they're also around about the same odds as the Gold Coast to make the 8. I would think that the Gold Coast should expect to finish above them on the table. So I just think Essendon, no one's backing them to win the flag or anything like that, but I think they've been slightly overrated in the market, so probably worth a sell.
And currently $4.90 to miss the top 8 on the Betfair Exchange, so you can lay them there. Mine, I'm selling Carlton. I know it's a big call, and that's what the headline's going to be. Karl laying Carlton for the top 8, but I simply think that their price is too short at this given time. I know that they've drifted slightly, but you can lay them at $1.65, and with their first 2 opening rounds, they're obviously playing Richmond. They've only beaten them once in the last 10 years almost. So Richmond certainly have the edge on Carlton, and then they got to play the premiers of last year, Geelong, away as well. So that's going to be a couple of really hard games for Carlton. I can't see their price staying the same after those 2 rounds. They're definitely going to drift. But after the first 2 rounds, their draw becomes significantly easier, and they should be winning 3-4 games in a row. Obviously, if they're losing, then their price is definitely going to keep drifting in that market. So laying Carlton for the top 8, and I'm going to look to buy them back in a couple of rounds.
It's certainly the biggest Richmond-Carlton game. I know they played that elimination final in 2013, but arguably the biggest Richmond-Carlton game since the 82 grand final in a lot of respects. Because generally when they played in round 1, one's been more up than the other. Last couple of years they've started with Carlton rising to get on some degree of parity, but they're both a chance to finish top 6 this year. And I think it's the best both of those sides have been at the same time. So, huge game. And I think there'll be a 9 in front of the crowd, I would assume.
Well, we hope so. Looking forward to having footy back. That's what it's all about, Daz. We're going to get to some betting strategies, some tips for this week. I know it's early in the week, but we're going to have a look at who we want to back and lay in round one. Daz, what are you thinking?
Yeah, it's one of the hardest rounds we've seen in a long time. I think the shortest favourite would be about $1.50 probably across the weekend. So many hard games. One that I do like at a bit of value, though, is Adelaide against the Giants. I know it's very difficult to get a read on those sides, but I think Adelaide, their list looks like it's improved a little bit, and I think they're tracking the right way, whereas the Giants, last year they slid a bit, and I get the feeling that trajectory might continue a little bit. So I'd have Adelaide. I think they're only underdogs because the game's away, but I very much like them to get the job done in that match at about $2.34.
And look, I don't need to continue on from you, Daz. I've got the exact same. I'm backing the Crows to win their round one matchup. I think $2.34 is value for them. Who are you laying this week, Daz?
Yeah, I think that there's always an upset in round one, not counting that one with Adelaide and the Giants, but it's difficult to find exactly where it sits. So Collingwood have got a good record against Geelong. Geelong potentially missing a couple of players. So that's one you could look at on Geelong. Gold Coast have a good record at Metricon, and they've matched up okay with the Swans lately. So that would be another one I would look at. And obviously St Kilda have been smashed with injuries. And as a result of that, Fremantle keep shortening, and deservedly so. If you think Ross Lyon can pull a rabbit out of a hat, then maybe Fremantle have drifted short enough. So I'd look at one of those three and go on gut feel. I think one of those three games will provide an upset.
Nice, Daz. Well, for me, this is a really tough game. And it's, as much as it's not going to be your top two premiership contenders for the year, an exciting game, I think, is going to be North Melbourne versus West Coast. There's really low expectations on both sides this year, but I'm going to lay North Melbourne at the $1.99 quote currently on the exchange. Look, West Coast have played North 23 times in Melbourne for 10 wins, which isn't a horrible record. That's compared to them playing Essendon 24 times and only winning 6. So they don't play too bad against North Melbourne away. I'm probably looking at the fact that I think West Coast are going to improve. They're going to get some players back. Obviously, Nick Nat is touch and go for round one. He probably doesn't play, but I don't think that affects them too much. They've still got a super forward line, even without Josh Kennedy being at the club this year. So either way, we're going to learn a lot about both sides. And just having a look at the least wins market, we've got North Melbourne at the pointy end. They're $2.80 for least wins this season. Then Hawthorn at $3.05, and then West Coast at $5.80. So keen to keep a close eye on that market post round one. It's going to be very interesting. Daz?
I was going to say, that's interesting there. So North Melbourne, I think, are slight favourites or even money in that game, yet they're much shorter than West Coast in the fewest wins market. So, yeah, that presents some opportunities on a trading sense to look around that.
Exactly, Daz, and that's what we're going to be all about this year. Trade talk. Daz, good first episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to a huge first round. I think a lot of those markets are going to move significantly based on how even these matchups are this week.
Well, as they say in horse racing, which we love so much, we're going to be better for the run. Thank you so much for watching the first episode of Trade Talk. We're looking forward to bringing you some more education and obviously some good comments from some of Betfair's AFL punters. But until next week, good luck everyone for round one, and we'll see you on Trade Talk next week.
Gamble responsibly. Call 1-800-858-858.